I'm actually going to talk about adult children of alcoholics, having been one all my life. I'm a member of Woods Chapel. I joined this church about a year ago, and I absolutely love it here. I really love it here. Two of my friends that adopted me from day one, and I always sit with them, are Sandy and Gary Beatty, and bless their hearts if they didn't come to support me tonight. Adam invited me because he and I work together at Raytown on Wednesday nights serving the homeless over there, and really love it. But anyway, I'm going to tell my story. I can tell my story in true openness because I have worked through it. I have taken the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've done the 4th step. I've done all of it. And I've surrendered to God what I needed to surrender to God, and He helped me all the way through. But some of what I have to say may be very painful for some of you to listen, so bear with me because it gets better in the end. My father abandoned my mother when she was 5 months pregnant with me, and we already had Cindy, my older sister, who is 18 months older than me. And so finally we get a stepfather when I was 5, and we were so excited, I remember, and he was an alcoholic. And from day one to the end of his life at 55, I never saw the man a day sober, ever. He drank beer as his alcohol of choice. He did work every day of his life. He was a functioning alcoholic. He was not a mean alcoholic. He was a sloppy drunk. He would get drunk until he couldn't walk, and that was the story. But he would come home from work every day. This is after we were older, and my mother had gone to work, and he would actually cook us dinner. And he would be coming down the driveway, and we'd say, "Here he comes with the square sack." And of course, that was the 6-pack, and that was the 6-pack he drank before he went to the bar and stayed at the bar until 1:30 every single night. But when we were very young, and it all started back in Springfield, Missouri, thank God, we went to the Baptist church because I had a godly foundation beforehand. They took us to Sunday school, and we stayed to church with my grandma. And Jesus is my guy too, Adam, wherever you are. Jesus is my guy. You bet. And it's a darn good thing because I wouldn't have made it to tell this story if Jesus wasn't my guy. But anyway, during the early years, I could remember that my mom and a friend of hers would always pile us in the station wagon late at night, blankets and pillows, and they'd go downtown Springfield, Missouri to try to find the drunks and drag them out of the bar. And they would, one of them would go in and leave the other with the kids, and they'd come out, and we'd be in the car, and we could hear the mom and dad screaming and yelling and fighting and so forth, and they'd get in the car all hysterical about what had happened. And this was the introduction to what they call in the alcoholic household excited misery. And we lived that way my entire life. It was always excited misery about one thing or another. Our lights were frequently turned off. Our gas was frequently turned off. We regularly didn't have a phone. They regularly repossessed our car. We bounced from one house to another, and there were 4 of us kids by this time. So when you see, and Adam, we can put that adult children of alcoholic thing up on the screen if you want to. It talks about the characteristics of adult children of alcoholics, and one of them is isolation. And you begin to feel that sense of isolation almost from day one, where, like you've shared tonight, you can't talk to anybody. It's a terrible problem. And you're embarrassed and you're humiliated that people might really know. So you do your best to act like a normal family, but it wasn't ever normal. It was never normal at all. So finally, after moving house to house, we moved to Kansas City, where my uncle had moved, and my dad got a new job at a bar. Yeah, at a bar. A nasty old neighborhood bar, and my mother went to work for the first time. She worked at the grocery store on the corner, and when she got off, the 2 of them went to drink every single solitary night from the time I was 12 until I was 20, almost 20 when I left home. And the other thing that talks on the list of them, one of them is the feeling of abandonment. This will make you terribly cringe, but I can remember being so lonely and feeling so abandoned that I dumped the dirty clothes out of the hamper in the bathroom and laid on them and smelled my parents' odor because I was that lonely and felt that desperately abandoned. And we were abandoned. We were abandoned spiritually, emotionally, physically, sometimes with hunger. And, you know, when the drunks came home, they didn't want to talk about it. They wanted to fight with each other. And you certainly had to stay quiet. But the role that I played, and you'll see this many times written, each one of the children have a role. And I was the scapegoat. And the alcoholics always have to have a place to place the blame. And so it was me. I kiddingly said to Adam earlier, I said, well, I'm shy, but I'm getting along. And, you know, I used to speak up and tell them that, hey, it's not normal you go out every night and do this. And boy, did I get it. You know, I really, really got it from them. And my sister, the hero and the caretaker, would say, well, if you'd just be quiet, everything would be all right. And so again, their development of the guilt, that it was me that caused this problem because I kept speaking up. But as we all know, it really wasn't my problem. It was the problem of alcoholism. So anyway, as we got, the third child is the lost child, and that was my little sister. And we would find her often closed in her closet in the dark underneath her clothes, feeling that lost from her life and from all other things. The last child was my brother, who died of alcoholism 2 years ago. He was the mascot. He was the one that would always make fun of things and try to make us laugh and be happy. And in the meantime, he was suffering below something fierce, something just horribly. So anyway, we babysat the little ones while my mom and dad went out. And then as my sister and I became teenagers, we began to resent that we had to be the parents to the other children, that our parents were never ever there. And I'm sure that tension was felt by the little children. So we did it, and we also had to clean the house and do all of those other things, the chores and everything. But my sister got married first. She left at 18, and when I graduated, I wanted more than anything to go to college, but I couldn't apply for college because my parents hadn't claimed insurance or income tax for 5 years. So I went to work, but my eager desire was to get married and leave this mess. If I couldn't go to college, I had to get married. So I did. I was 19 plus years old, and I married an alcoholic, as could be predicted, you know, because he was somebody I felt sorry for, and I could rescue him and take care of him. And then we ran off to North Carolina and went to his hometown, and his father was a terrible alcoholic. So when they say that this is a family disease and that we inherit the same characteristics, that we either become alcoholics, marry alcoholics, or both, I mean, that trend is absolutely true. But anyway, that marriage didn't last very long at all, and my desire to go to college began because I was working, and I started sending myself to college, and that's where I met husband number 2, but it was 5 years later. I did my drinking on the plaza, so it didn't qualify for alcoholism. It wasn't. It's called denial. You know, when you drink out of a fancy cup in an upscale restaurant or bar, it's not like that old nasty neighborhood bar. But I did my best. I did my best to cultivate my own disease of alcoholism. I didn't ever really achieve, but I did work at it. I was always an overachiever. I was an overachiever in high school and accelerated classes, and really wanted to learn and had a great deal of ambition. But the partying, you know, that was a reward for hard work. I was a workaholic from the day one that I went to work. So anyway, then the second marriage began to fail, and I knew that, and I was going to counseling all of this time. But I can tell you, counseling may help anxiety, and I don't doubt your anxiety at all. But counseling doesn't help alcoholism. At that time, they did not understand the problem. They didn't fix the problem, and I was frustrated because I was paying for this myself. So anyway, I tried to turn back to God to save my marriage. I converted to Catholicism. It didn't save my marriage, but it did save my life. I still continue to drink because, Catholics like to drink. They'd like to drink a lot, as a matter of fact. But I got a wonderful new job, was celebrating that new job, met a new guy, really liked the new guy. Yep, you guessed it, I got pregnant. And that was my beginning of my bottom, not drinking. Well, for 3 weeks, I vomited all the time and was sick and just terrible. And I thought, I have the 3-week flu. For heaven's sake, I can't get over this. Well, it wasn't the flu, it was pregnancy. But I was executive property director or manager at the Plaza, 3 10-story high-rises. And so when they learned that I was pregnant, I was told that I couldn't continue if I kept the child. I would have to abort, and that would be it. And I said, I can't do that. I just can't do that. And then the father of the child said, if you don't get an abortion, I'm gone and you'll never see me. Well, he kept to his word, so here I was. But I couldn't drink. I couldn't touch a drop of alcohol. Thank God for that. But I had no job. I had no home because my apartment was part of that salary package and so forth. And so when my son was born at 10 pounds, 7 ounces, here I was, 7 inches of snow, a new baby, and no job and no home. And, somebody spoke about miracles, but the miracles began then too. Because God takes us where we are, and he takes us where we are in recovery. And it was unbelievable because at the same time, the insurance company had determined that I conceived the child in between my old job and my new, and neither one of them were paying. So, it was getting bad. It's getting really scary. But I rented an apartment to the head of the OBGYN department at Truman Medical Center. And he said, nope, you come and I'll take care of you and it won't cost you a penny, and he did. Anonymously, some people at the parish adopted me and said that they would give us $750 a month for the first year so I could get on my feet. I still to this day don't know who those people were, but the check went into my bank every single month. Good Catholics, they really put their money where their mouth was. And, so we made it. We absolutely made it. But again, the alcoholism wasn't cured. So my mother was going to AA. She wasn't going to AA, she was going to Al-Anon. And she brought this laundry list that you're looking at home to me. And she said, some of the gals at Al-Anon said I probably ought to bring this to one of my children or all of my children. And so she did, and she left, and I had my son and sit down when he went to take a nap, and I was just enraged. I was in a rage. I was so angry when I went, and this is what's been wrong with me all this time. And so a Pandora's box had been opened, and that began the next 15 years of Al-Anon and adult children of alcoholics and healing and taking the 12 steps, realizing, and so we can talk about what the alcoholic did to me. But having developed those same characteristics, I had to look at what I'd done to others. And yes, when we're in Al-Anon, we do the same thing to others. Not intentionally, not with the drink in hand, but definitely because we're tied up emotionally. We can't be present to others. We can't oftentimes do the things that are in front of us that need to be done. We're too depressed to do it because the addict's got us, whatever. But anyway, those things are real for Al-Anon too. And yet the denial for the Al-Anon folks and the adult children of alcoholics is probably worse because they don't have that thing of the bruises on the body, the accidents that they can't, identify what happened. They may not have those things. And so it's harder. Sometimes it's harder to recognize. But I did, and I made the amends, and there were lots of them. There were lots and lots of amends to be made. To the ex-husbands, that I deliberately used the first one to get married and move away, to the second one who I had wounded through no fault of his own. He was a great man because The truth, that's another miracle, is the truth was when I became pregnant, he came in his friendship again and started taking me to dinner when I was pregnant, was there and saw my son born. He and I never wanted to have any children. And the man never left my side for the next 21 years. It wasn't his child. We would go places, he would be carrying my son, and people would say, well, he looks just like his dad, but he doesn't look like his mom. And it wasn't his child. And those are miracles that God causes to happen and brings about in our life when we let him do it. And literally the act of surrender after all these things that I just told you, the lost job, all of those things, when they happened, there was nowhere to do but to turn it to God, and because I had no resources, it was all gone. So anyway, through Al-Anon again and through Adult Children of Alcoholics, we had a friend of ours in adult children who went to Valley Hope to treatment, and so several of us gals decided to go down and share a group weekend with our friend who was in recovery. And we were in one of her counseling sessions, and I recall one of the biggest moments of my life when they were sharing about confronting their I can't. And the counselor said, there's a big difference between I can't and I don't want to. And that was a real turning point for me, because a lot of times I get stuck in the I can't. And one of the bitter parts of my life was that I hadn't been able to go to college. So somebody began talking about how they didn't think they could go to college, but they'd called the university and so forth and so on. So I went home, and that's what I did. And sure enough, I got a full paid scholarship, the President's Scholarship and the Pell Grant, and I went to college, and I finished my college, all because of the grace of God, all because of the grace of God, and because of the grace of the Al-Anon program and people in the program like you all here tonight who've suffered with this horrible disease, who've suffered with the effects of either the addict or the alcoholic, whichever it may be. But I'm glad today, I'm glad to be up here to say I am very glad that I was raised in alcoholism. Why? Because I think there are very few people, very, very few people who have the program in front of them, the tools in front of them, and the reason, the deep, deep reason to really examine what goes on in our lives and say, hey, I'm going to change this. I want to change this. And most of all, I'm going to turn to God and have him help me change this. So I'm grateful. I'm very, very grateful for that. So I think that may be all I have to say tonight. I was very nervous. Thank you for tolerating my nervousness. It's a great group. It's a great group. Thank you.